On his way up to the next level, the angels noticed Moses, peace be upon him, crying, and asked him why. So he replied without any resent, "This ghulam, or young man's ummah, or nation, will have more followers than me on the last day, without envy or dissent." In the final seventh heaven, he met Abraham, or Ibrahim, peace be upon him, whom he greeted as he did to Adam, peace be upon him, like a father to a son. Abraham was the father of Jews and Arabs as well, and the Prophet, peace be upon him, said that he looked like him, second to none. Abraham was resting his back against the Baytul Ma'mur, or oft visited house, which the Kaaba mimics in its role. Every day 70,000 angels circle around it, never to return to it again, performing pilgrimage, a once-in-a-lifetime goal. Prophet Abraham then entered lush gardens, surrounded by the souls of infants who had died in their innocent state. The Prophet, peace be upon him, was consoled that anyone who entered Islam would have their prior sins wiped clean from their slate. Prophet Abraham, peace be upon him, asked Muhammad, peace be upon him, to remind believers that paradise was spacious and fertile with musk for soil. As the Prophet, peace be upon him, looked around, he saw tents made out of pearls and bejeweled mansions, rewards for those who toil. He was thrilled to have met Abraham, Khalilullah, or the friend of Allah, but then Gabriel told him to walk to an elevation and took him to a glorious tree called the Sidratul Muntaha, or the furthest lot tree, for a magnificent revelation. He noticed 4 rivers emanating below it, 2 showing, the Nile and Euphrates, and 2 hidden with a shimmering flow. The lot tree's leaves were as big as elephant ears, and its fruits like 6-foot Yemeni jugs, beyond which angels do not go. Gabriel halted at its boundary, but urged the Prophet, peace be upon him, to go on, passing angels who record God's decrees as scribes. Angels alighted on the tree like starlings or golden butterflies, and it lit up in colors and lights impossible to describe. All of a sudden, the tree lit up with an amazing, wondrous glow as the Prophet, peace be upon him, moved in awe towards Allah's throne. Gabriel stepped back in his angelic form with 600 bejeweled wings, while Muhammad, peace be upon him, walked into veils of light alone. When the Prophet, peace be upon him, was asked whether or not he saw Allah, he said he didn't, as Allah was beyond many veils of light. Yet the greatest prize in paradise will be to see Allah with our eyes, above His throne, in a manner that befits His might. Words cannot describe what happened next, but sufficient is that mortal men are only able to see Allah after they die. It was in their meeting that Allah decreed that all who die without committing idolatry or shirk will enter paradise. Also revealed during that momentous event were the last 2 verses of Surah Baqarah, as Allah's speech in the Quran, but due to the intervention of Prophet Moses, peace be upon him, the daily prayers were reduced from 50 to 5 for the followers of Islam. For when the Prophet, peace be upon him, went back to the 6th heaven, Moses, peace be upon him, asked how many prayers God had decreed, so he could advise. When told it was 50, he insisted the Prophet, peace be upon him, ask for a reduction, as Jews had found it hard to comply or to compromise. So the Prophet, peace be upon him, kept on going back to obtain a reduction, granted by Allah's mercy, indicating Islam's ease by intent, until he felt shy. Then God decreed, I have reduced the prayers from 50 to 5, each one given a reward equal to 10. Finally, Gabriel took him on his journey back, where he not only saw the wonders of paradise, but also the horrors of hell. On one extreme he saw the gold brick house of Omar, and on the other he saw adulterers burning in a narrow-necked well. He heard the footsteps of Muezzin Bilal, but also saw takers of usury, with snakes writhing in bloated bellies being trod. He saw faces of backbiters being cut with copper nails, but so formed into treasures, dhikr, or the remembrance of God. He saw rivers of milk, wine, and honey, but also scissors of fire cutting the lips of those who don't practice as they preach. He saw tree trunks made of gold, but fire entering and exiting those who pilfered an orphan's wealth out of their reach. He saw Angel Malik, the unsmiling keeper of hell, and gave him salams, but saw fruits of Jannah of a dazzling array. He saw the Zaqqum tree of hell with hurtful berries and stalks of snakeheads, but saw heaven's gardens all in a day. He even saw Dajjal, the Antichrist, blind in his right eye, the other a murky green, biding his time, but soon to appear. It was all very exhilarating and a great honor, but eventually Gabriel led him back towards earth's mundane sphere. When he alighted at his departure point in Jerusalem, he was welcomed by all the former prophets who had ever been. In fact, all 124,000 were assembled, and he recognized Abraham, Moses, and Jesus, peace be upon them all, amongst others that were seen. All of God's prophets lined up in a row behind him, and he was honored to lead them in prayer, indicating his position. He led them in Fajr or dawn prayer in the new daily format, being the last prophet and seal, completing God's mission. Now, for those who don't pray their 5 daily prayers, please comprehend their importance and their magnificent initiation. In fact, the Prophet, peace be upon him, said abandoning the 5 prayers breaks the covenant between him and us, so fulfill your obligation. Then he mounted the Buraq for the return journey, and on the way back to Mecca, a Syrian trade caravan he did spot. A camel bolted, startled by the Buraq, but he stopped by another train to see if a drink of water was available or not. All the trade crews were fast asleep, so he drank water from their covered containers left for the public to partake. As they were headed for Mecca, he noted the caravan's details like sacks on camels, estimating how long they'd take. For if a camel train traveled 25 miles per day, the journey from Mecca to Jerusalem would take a month to complete. So when Gabriel returned Muhammad, peace be upon him, to the Hijr of the Kaaba, he worried how he would explain such an amazing feat. As he sat in anguish over how he would go about telling the people about his overnight trip, along came the worst one. Abu Jahl noticed the sad look on the Prophet's face and quipped, "Do you have any news?" in earnest whilst poking fun. So the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, "I was taken on a journey last night, relaying the event. You went to Bayt al-Maqdis last night and sit here this morning? If I call the people, will you repeat what you just said?" He, peace be upon him, replied affirmatively, and as he addressed them, Meccan heads shook in disbelief as they clapped and jeered. Many who had warmed to Islam now turned on their heels, and the Prophet's enemies had a field day as they cheered. Some quizzed Abu Bakr, who replied, "If Muhammad, peace be upon him, said so, then I believe him." So they accused him of being a freak. He added, "I believe in greater. God's revelation descends to him from heaven. Hence his epithet, true believer, or as-Siddiq." Others knew the Prophet, peace be upon him, had never been to Jerusalem, and vowed to accept his story if he only described it all clear. As he did so, he felt unsure. So Allah raised a vision of Jerusalem before his eyes, so he described it in detail without fear. They were still in doubt, so he, peace be upon him, described the trade caravan, its estimated time of arrival, and his own interactions. But even though the camel train came in exactly as he had predicted, they stuck to opposition and disbelieving factions. Next day, Gabriel taught the Prophet, peace be upon him, the new prayer and daily timings, who in turn led the Muslims in Dhuhr at noon. It wasn't long before the Meccans demanded a miracle, but still turned away after seeing the Prophet, peace be upon him, split the moon. Subsequently, Jerusalem's Christian patriarch recalled a night when Al-Aqsa's door stayed ajar, as immovable as a mountain, and by daylight he verified that the cornerstone had a hole with traces of a riding beast tethered and ready for mounting.